Don't quote me, but it actually might be spring in England. What's up, London Reelers? This is Brian Rose, and we see sunshine here, which is a nice change, but if you've lived in the UK long enough, you know not to assume it's going to stay. We've just dropped the episode with Daniele Bolelli, also known as the Drunken Taoist, which is the name of his podcast. This week, everyone is loving Daniele's positive energy. He's got a great outlook on life. He lost his wife a few years ago and was left with a very young daughter, and he had to kind of practice what he preached. He's a philosopher, and he had to just figure out a way to get through life. And he's got a famous quote, which he raises the middle finger to the hopelessness of life and reacts with a smile. So I'm probably screwing that up, but I think you'll like Daniele a lot. I had a great sit down with him in LA in his backyard for a couple hours, so please check that out. This week we have Dr. Koert van Mensvoort. He's from Holland, if you didn't guess. He is a scientist, a philosopher, and he has this concept called next nature. And he tries to look at nature and technology and human evolvement as something that we should just embrace. And it's like a different kind of philosophy as opposed to being green, where you're trying to avoid what's happening to the world and what's happening with humans using up resources, or how we must manufacture food to feed the future 9 billion people of the world. And he looks at it in a way of something that we just kind of have to philosophically kind of accept and find new ways of dealing with it. And it's a very interesting way he discusses it. He talks about there's some nature reserves in Holland where they actually go and they try to recreate nature, and they stick animals in there, and they find over the course of the months they have to clean up the dead ones and put new animals back in there. And he likes to remind us that nature isn't always pretty. Nature can be disgusting, it can be brutal, it can be violent. In fact, those are just human morals that we put on what is really just a phenomenon. So it's kind of a Buddhist approach in that way, and I think it's an interesting way to look at the meat we eat, and how animals would normally die in the wild, etc. So Koert was fantastic. He also talked a little bit about Bitcoin, which is something I want to have a full episode on. I'm just looking for the right guest, and it's this new, I guess, kind of an internet currency that doesn't have it doesn't have a name transferred to it, and it's being used on the Silk Road, which is kind of the underground internet black market. And I want to learn more about Bitcoin and get some more people on there, but Koert talked a bit about it, since he even finds currencies to be a bit of the next nature phenomenon. So I hope you enjoy Koert. We've got a big lineup coming up. We got Mr. Brian Callen dropping on Sunday. I spent a couple hours with him in LA. That will round out my interviews in LA. Never a dull moment on the West Coast. Brian was very cool. I really like his own podcast, The Brian Callen Show. He sits down with really interesting guests for an hour, one of them being his dad, and he sits down with fighters, you name it, and I think he's got a good style, and it's a one-on-one, and it's really deep stuff. And Brian's really smart, a real fun guy, a crazy guy. I think he can be super funny and super serious at the same time. So really cool to have him. And then I was pleasantly surprised to sit down with Mr. Richard Viller. He's not a doctor, even though he's a surgeon. That's just a nomenclature here in the UK. He's ex-SAS, and he's the guy they drop into places like Haiti after an earthquake. He's there 30 hours after the earthquake, and he has to show up and basically find water. He has to find a tennis court that's going to be a hospital. He's got to get in with the local power man, and that could be a thug, that could be a government official, that could be whoever, and basically make things happen and heal people. And he's quintessentially British, and it makes me proud to live in this country because he's as humble as he is a badass. And I'm really looking forward to dropping this episode. Sometimes I just get pleasantly surprised. I rack up, I don't know, I have a rough idea what these guys are going to be like, and then I just sit there with my mouth dropping open as I see these individuals that normally wouldn't be featured on TV, and we get 90 minutes with them. It's like, wow. So that's awesome. So there you go. That's what's coming up. Exciting stuff. We're also dropping daily clips from old episodes. I think we're going to call them the London Reel Daily Dose. So if you want to check those out, I'll be tweeting those. They're on our new YouTube channel, and they're like 5 or 10 minute clips from people we've had in the past that you might have missed if you didn't have the full hour and a half, or just something that might be poignant or relevant. So check those out. I'll be tweeting those out, and let me know what you think of that. Also, I'll be requesting your questions for interviews in a video format. If you can leave me a YouTube video response and I use your question, then I'll stick it up on the episode. I'm trying to figure out how to do this with video or audio, but it really will be fun. It'll be interactive, and it's a great way for me to get your feedback and questions really from the guests. So I'll be doing more of that. Yes, we're taking it to the next level here. So that is the deal. We are sponsored by the folks and the makers of Alpha Brain. Now, Alpha Brain is a nootropic that makes my dome work a little bit better. It's special nutrients that helps the synapses fire better, and which makes me so damn smart. The good looking, that's a little bit different. That's more genetic. But for the good looking part, you can also go to Onnit. If you want to go there, go to londonreal.tv, click on the banner for Alpha Brain. You go to Onnit Labs, where you can get the new Primal kettlebells that will make you good looking. And I love a good kettlebell workout there. They got a DVD that'll show you how to do it. They got the Hemp Force Protein, Shroom Tech Sport. They got the Blend Tech blenders. I still recommend a kale shake, the Bulletproof coffee. We got Dave Asprey in the house next week. Oh my gosh, how do I do it all? I don't know. It's crazy. So check out Onnit Labs, and tell them I sent you. Our other sponsor is Audible. If you want to check out an Audible book and you're tired of listening to podcasts all the time, I get it. I get tired of it too. I'm recommending Eddie Huang, Straight Off the Boat. And if you want a free copy of that, go to audibletrial.com/London Real and pick up that on a 30-day trial. You get a free audiobook. You can cancel after that, and you'll support the show, which we appreciate. That's it, kids. It's getting crazy out there. 5,000 Facebook likes, almost 50,000 Twitter followers, about to hit 1 million views on YouTube. Oh man, what are you gonna do? What you gonna do? We're gonna do more shows. So it's fun here. Please come and get involved. We're gonna have another night out in London with the interns. It was like 8 or 9 last time. Lots of fun, lots of tequila. If you want to volunteer and be part of the intern crew and learn lots of good stuff and be involved in some fun controversy, just do it. Send me an email at info@londonreal.tv. You won't regret it. It's better than not doing anything, I guarantee it. And otherwise, if you just want to help us out, share this episode on Facebook, Twitter, tell your friends about us. That's always good. And that's it, man. Business as usual. You know how I say around here at London Real, we can't stop and we won't stop. Here's Dr. Koert van Mensvoort.
London Real, one of the coolest up-and-coming podcasts.
All right, guys, I say we do this. Let's have some fun.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
All right, here we go.
Enjoy.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. With me today is Andre Domenichini. Domenichini, my mistake. He has a master's in biomedicine, and I thought he would be perfect to sit in today with our guest, who is Dr. Koert van Mensvoort. And you are an artist, a philosopher, a scientist. You are best known for your work on the philosophical concept of next nature.
But what is it?
Yeah, but what is it? We're going to talk about that today. You're the head of the Next Nature Lab at the Industrial Design Department of the Eindhoven University of Technology.
That's right.
Did I pronounce that right? Okay. And you're also the founder and director of the Next Nature Foundation, which is a design and think tank based in Amsterdam.
That's right.
Koert, welcome to London.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure having you here. When I was looking through your book, Next Nature, and man, I mean, with the photographs and everything in here, it is a lot going on. You might want to describe what that cover photo is at some point. And it's kind of like a bunch of magazines put together in a book. And with the visual concepts, I find your stuff is fascinating. You seem to draw people in with images and video as opposed to some dry research. But I'll get straight to the point.
Okay.
I think your projects address how technology becomes so omnipresent and uncontrollable that we start to perceive it as nature on its own. But maybe you can tell us more about your concept of next nature.
Yeah, indeed. It is about looking differently at the relationship between people, nature, and technology, or especially nature and technology. Typically, we see nature and technology as opposites, like black and white. Right. On the one hand, you have nature, and technology is the opposite. But I think we now start to understand that there's a nuance there, and with our technology, we cause the rising of a next nature. So with our technology, we transform nature into something else, which in the end is a next nature. But I promote it as a real nature because it can be dangerous, it can be unpredictable, and it's very different than the nature that we always talk about, like the nature we have to save and preserve. But at the same time, there's this next nature emerging all around us. And that's the new perspective I want to put forward.
What's a common example you'll give to like a grandma that says, Koert, what is this next nature? What's like a few examples you give them for what you're talking about?
Well, if you describe, especially I'm from the Netherlands, and we have this long tradition of struggling against nature because a large portion of the country is below sea level,
right.
And we build lots of dikes to get to keep the ocean out. But strangely enough, nowadays people are more worried about financial crisis, mortgage rates, than about leaking dikes or a hurricane. So there you see a dynamic that the more threatening entity has become this technological environment that we're all embedded in. Is that a clear example, or is it too difficult?
It's kind of clear. So you're saying as nature, as in now as humans, our mind share is on something that's a new nature. We're not running from the lions or trying to keep the water out.
Yeah, there are different monsters and there are different hurricanes, but they are based in our own culture and technology. And that's the story. Another example I often give, which is more compact, I think, is the mobile phone. I think that's quite a interesting thing what happened there. 20 years ago, no one had a mobile phone. Then the mobile phone was introduced, and at a certain moment you thought, maybe I should buy a mobile phone myself. And now today, when you leave your house without the mobile phone, you feel almost naked, or as if you are missing a limb.
Yeah, people won't do it. They'll go back and drive 20 miles back to get their mobile phone.
They really merged with this technology, which 20 years ago was completely new, and now it's not part of your body, that's not the point, but it is part of your lifestyle and identity. And that I also give as an example of a next nature, how this technology has become a next nature to us.
It feels like losing a sense, doesn't it, when you forget your mobile phone or your internet goes down?
Yes,
like
so it already became this new sense. And I think it's quite striking that technology can do this, also within a period of 20 years, that you just see it happening. And after it happened, you don't think about it anymore. It's also strange.
Now, do you address the possibility in the future that our biology will be part technology, that why carry around the mobile phone when you can implant it in your arm? And do you kind of talk about all the issues that come up with that? Because there's a lot of questions about whether that's...
Yeah, certainly. Certainly that can be anticipated. Although before we go ahead and talk about the future, maybe it's more important to first talk about the past.
Okay.
Because if you give the example of the mobile phone as an example of a technology that started as something new and alien, and then it became familiar, and now it's completely naturalized. And if you look in the past, did that happen before? The answer absolutely is yes, and many times. So if we would have had this discussion 150 years ago, we would have probably talked about electric light as a new technology, which at that time was very new and had to be explained to people, and people were also worried if electric light would not mess with their day-night cycle and all these kind of things. And yeah, now we don't think about electric light as technology at all. You could even go further back and talk about the example of agriculture.
Right.
Today, when we think of agriculture, it's part of our human nature that we practice agriculture. We plant crops, we wait for them to grow, and then we harvest them. Of course we do that. But 10,000 years ago, this was a technological revolution. It was the next nature of 10,000 years ago, you could say, which really changed how we live. When we started, before agriculture, we were living the hunting-gathering life on the savannah. But with agriculture, we started planting crops, wait for them to grow, which at the time was a radical intervention in the natural environment.
So you're saying that we should kind of embrace this technology and not be fearful of it because we've been doing it for thousands of years?
Now, I think when we talk about technology, if you look at people and you see how they talk about, or you hear how they talk about technology, most people describe technology as anything that was invented during your lifetime. Or maybe even a worse definition is everything that doesn't quite work yet. And I think my story about technology is that it's much more than that. And we are already from the very beginning of that, we are people practicing technology. So it's also natural for us to practice technology. And once you have that perspective, you also realize the dynamic and the co-evolutionary setting in which we are entangled with our technology. And that doesn't mean, because then next you look at the future, and that doesn't mean that you should just not be critical anymore and move forward, but it might help you understand what is going on and maybe even be more critical or be more able to steer it. That's what I'm hoping for.
So yours is kind of more of a mind frame of
Yeah,
how we okay. And do you think the current mind frame needs to change? Do you think we currently are technophobic?
We're also technophiles in the sense that
Yes,
we love technology, but I think our understanding of technology is naive. We don't understand it to its full depth, and also our understanding of nature is naive. So my project is about understanding the relationship between nature and technology in a different way. Because from the very beginning when we started with technology, think of building a roof above your head. You do this, you build technology to free yourself from the forces of nature. That's the purpose of technology. But while you're doing that, you're also creating a new setting, a new situation, a next nature, you could say, that has its own dynamics and that might be as wild and unpredictable as ever. So that's what I mean with that we are with our technology transforming nature. And this is quite a new perspective, because in the past people used to think of technology as anti-natural and a way to remove nature. And then in the end we would have the perfect technology and we would have conquered nature altogether and just have this utopian world. I'm afraid that's not going to happen because with every new technology we end up in a new situation which is complex. It has new opportunities but also new worries, new risks, and that's the situation. It will never end because nature changes along with us.
Suppose we're sort of just replacing one ecosystem for a new one.
Basically, that's what we're doing.
But all the environmentalists say we're doing it wrong because we're ruining nature, because nature 200 years ago wasn't like this. It didn't have these apparently greenhouse gases. It didn't have this. Now, what do you say to those people? I always say, there was an ice age 2,000 years ago and you could walk across to France. Maybe not 2,000, sorry, 10,000 or 20,000. So the environment is constantly changing. But what do you say to the people that say we've ruined this earth through technology and it should go back to where we used to be? Because it sounds like you're trying to preach a different mind frame.
Certainly, and because the assumption of these environmentalists is that there was once a nature which was the good nature, the nature that was not yet spoiled by people, it was not touched by people, and in a way that was a better nature than what we have now. That's the assumption, and I sense that's also the feeling of this biblical untouched nature, original nature, that mankind was kicked out of the paradise, and since then we can only destroy things. And I just think that's a too limited way of looking at nature and our position in nature, because already from the very beginning we're part of nature, but we're also transforming nature. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's evolution. And evolution goes on, things will change. The only thing is that we do have a responsibility, because we have a very large impact on the planet now as humans. And the question is, which direction do we want to go?
So what do you say to people that say we're depleting the oil, we're I don't know, waste everywhere, all the building of the cities is killing natural living things? I mean, what do you say to the classic environmental arguments, right back at you, that we're ruining this pure form of nature we used to have? Do you tell them that it's just part of an evolving ecosystem, that we just need to deal now with the current reality and not be depressed about it? Or
no, I often it's also in the book. I often use the image of the technosphere that we are creating. And so if you look at the beginning of Earth, then at first there was just a geosphere. Earth emerged 5 billion years ago, a little bit less than 5 billion years ago. And then it took 3 billion years for a biosphere to grow on planet Earth. And 1 billion years later, mankind arose. And now a new sphere is emerging, which is the technosphere. And that the technosphere contains all human technology, basically all human activity, everything that comes from the human mind. And this is a new evolutionary step, but it's also threatening the biosphere. So just like the biosphere interacts with the geosphere, which is much older, this new emerging phenomenon of the technosphere also interacts with the biosphere. And we are sort of in the position that we created this, so we have a big responsibility. It's just that we cannot go back. That's too conservative. So we cannot go back. And I think right now often the discussion is, can we intervene? Can we fiddle with things? Yes or no? And I think it should not be the yes or no discussion, because we're beyond that. We're doing this, but it should be the how discussion, and to what extent, because in this technosphere there are all kinds of dynamics. Think of corporations that have a corporate agenda, and they might not, their first thing on their list might not be to maintain a strong biosphere. That's typically something we need that to breathe fresh air and to have a livable environment. But there are also now these new dynamics and entities that don't need it. And I think we first have to have an awareness of that, and then we can hopefully guide it in a direction that's rewarding not only for people, but also for other elements in the biosphere. So we should maintain a balance between the technosphere and the biosphere. I realize it sounds quite abstract, but I think that's what needs to be done.
You have a chapter in the book that says real nature is not green. What did you mean by that?
A lot of that is about, I talk about the naivety of nature, and also what I call biomimic marketing. Because if you look around, and anyone can do this, if you look around for a week and you count the number of times that you see products around you that use images of nature to market themselves, then you also understand that there are many examples. You find it in the supermarket. There are already green Hummers that are a little bit less polluting than the previous model, and then they're presented as this green thing. You can buy organic stuff that's supposedly made according to the principles of nature, although it's never really defined what those principles are. So it's all around us, all these visual stimuli that promote a certain notion of nature also. So products use images of nature to sell themselves, but the layer underneath is also that a one-sided, romanticized image of nature is promoted. And this is the harmonic, beautiful, inherently good nature. And that's really strong in our minds, while all the darker sides of nature, think of death, diseases, unpredictability, extreme cruelty, and other amoral qualities that are also part of nature, they are not used in this visual sphere in which an image of nature is put upon us. So hence, as a result, we have this naive view on nature. And I think that needs to change.
This must be controversial, especially in Holland.
It is, although in Holland there's also there is sort of a consensus that everyone knows that the country was built. So already in the 17th century, French philosopher Voltaire used to say, God created the world, except for the Netherlands, that they have done themselves.
I saw that quote on the website.
Yeah.
I had a little note to ask you about that.
Yeah. What did you want to ask?
I was just curious. Do you think it's something sort of inherent to the environment that the Dutch people had to deal with? Just sort of because they had to create this kind of world that didn't exist to be able to survive, that it kind of shaped the way they think?
I think there's certainly something going on there, yeah. Because if you live in a country and you realize that everything is constructed, and even in the Netherlands we construct nature resorts, so we gain land from the ocean, or we buy land from a farmer, and then the farmer has to go out, and then we recreate a nature resort according to our idea of what it supposedly looked like 10,000 years ago.
Like
before.
a theme park, like a wild animal park?
It's sort of like Disneyland for grown-ups.
Okay.
And it's also, we linger in the illusion then that's a natural resort, but it's a small country and it's really constructed and maintained. So it feels a bit like Disneyland style natural resort.
I think you mentioned in your essay about that they sort of remove dead animals and feed them in the winter. So it's
Yes.
the opposite of nature in many ways, but it makes me to look like the romantic notion that we
Yes,
expect.
in a way it's like a beautiful landscape painting, but then in a very high resolution, three-dimensional style that you can walk through on a nice Sunday afternoon, but it's completely constructed.
It's funny because like some people are against, say, shooting animals in the States, and they're very against hunting and all that stuff. And then you show, a bear eating an animal, or you show an overpopulated animal just dying off from starvation. That's okay, but you're not allowed to shoot it, but you're allowed to go to the grocery store and buy it. So there's all this moral conflict going on with these things.
Yes. There's some cognitive dissonance that it's also you could compare it with going to a nudist beach. That before you enter the beach, everyone is wearing clothes, and then the rule is that once you enter, you take off all your clothes and you act as if it's completely normal that you walk around naked. And that's how we also deal with nature. That we have this code. This is natural, and here I walk in on a Sunday afternoon, and now I'm walking in nature.
These are the reserves you're talking
The
about?
reserves.
Okay, okay. And I know you talk a lot about supermarkets, and you use that as kind of a metaphor for a lot of what you talk about in Next Nature. What is it with you in the supermarket, and how do you use that as an explanation of a lot of your different things with Next Nature?
Personally, I just think it's a fascinating space. And why is that? Because I always have this fantasy of what would happen if you would take a caveman and you would put the caveman in a time machine, and then he would arrive at the supermarket here around the corner.
I have to tell you a quick story. I was in Los Angeles last week, and I went home to San Diego, and I went into this huge supermarket near where my parents live. And I walked in there and I felt like a caveman. I mean, it had an entire aisle, 50 meters of cereal, different kinds of cereal, and it had a flower shop on one end and a pharmacy and a bakery and a deli and a butcher, and it had like 400 kinds of cheese and all the packaging you could want. So, and it was the strangest thing.
But you felt like a caveman, you say?
I was just like, wow, because in England you have stores, but you didn't. This was to the max. This is like an American-sized version. I mean, the whole thing must have been not a square mile, maybe a square kilo. It was huge, and kilometer. And yeah, so I kind of know what you mean. But what were you saying? What does a caveman see? I saw so many choices that they were confusing to me.
Yeah, it's confusing, and also I
saw a disconnect between nature and what I was eating, which I guess
it's disturbing in a way. I think it's both fascinating and disturbing at the same time, and you have to do something with it. So that's for me also the reason then to start to study it, because if you walk into a supermarket, you see this enormous diversity of products, and then you buy a newspaper, and then you read biodiversity is decreasing. And I think, okay, how is this balancing out? Are they connected? And I think they are connected, but we're not aware of the connection.
So we're basically being presented with all sorts of choices and all sorts of different diverse lifestyles. And then we're also being told, on the other hand, that things are dying and things are going extinct.
Yeah, in a way, then I think, okay, old nature is being pushed away by next nature. And in the end, on which side will I be? And then I'm really not sure.
You're kind of Buddhist about it. You don't judge it. You're kind
I try not to judge it because, well, I'm starting to judge it more and more, but very deliberately when I started with this way of thinking and the project, I decided that I would not immediately take a moral position because that's, well, it's powerful, but it's also very powerful to try to look at things at face value and try to first understand them and then only decide what the morality would be. And I also saw this when I started with the project of Next Nature and the way of thinking. In the beginning, there were also a lot of people who said, you cannot think like that. But yeah, you can think like that. But then the question is, what are the consequences?
And what are they, the consequences of thinking in the Next Nature type way?
I think we still have to figure that out exactly. But I think we can also not remain in the naivety and of having this superficial notion of nature as something static from the past. So for me, it has been very helpful to understand nature as a dynamic force and to also see nature in places like the supermarket. It's just a different kind of nature, but I see an evolutionary process, and I see also the force of it. So then you realize that on the one hand you have the threatened nature which we try to save and preserve, but there's also this threatening next nature which we also have to guide. And how to guide it, that's the big question mark right now, today.
I think not having such a strong moral sort of outlook from the beginning is a good way to look at it, because we tend to exaggerate one way or another. If you look at the Victorians, they were the opposite of that sort of natural is good. You know, they hated nature, They wanted to remove themselves, they wanted to be less animalistic as possible. And we went so far that way, and then we swing the other way, and suddenly nature is perfect and all we need to do. And we just seem to tick back and forth, where really reality is usually in the middle.
Probably, yeah.
You have this video where you're growing meat in a lab, and you said something like lab-grown meat is not a technology push, but a societal pull.
Yes.
And can you just describe the growing the meat in the lab and then what you meant by that?
Yes. Yeah, I think, well, if you walk in the supermarket now, you see all this meat, but you don't see the meat production. But
that's the biggest disconnect in the supermarket, is the meat production, let's be honest, right?
Yes, the way meat is produced today, if you just do the math and you think, okay, in 50 years there will probably be 9 billion people, also regions of the world that are becoming more rich, and everywhere where people become more rich, they start to eat more meat.
Yeah. China's a perfect example, right?
Yeah, and we can simply not maintain the meat production of today. It's not going to sustain itself. It's not sustainable. It costs too much energy. It's not going to work. So then, what will happen? Will we all become vegetarian? That's one scenario, and eat rice and beans. Might happen. We could eat more insects, because that's also a source of protein as an alternative. Could happen. Or we start to produce meat in a different way, without hurting the animal, but just taking a few cells from the animal and growing them in a controlled setting into a piece of meat. And right now, if you walk out of the door and you ask people on the street, would you eat lab-grown meat? They say, I'm not going to eat that. And then they walk into the supermarket and they buy these cubes of chickens. So already the meat today is very abstract, but we're used to it. So when I look at it, then I think, okay, I have to move in that field and start to envision what this meat is going to be. And to answer your question on the technology push or societal pull, because most people think in vitro meat or lab-grown meat is a technology push, but it's not, because right now the traditional meat industry, they're not investing in it. They just try to maintain the old model. And I think they will also not be the ones who will do it. Just like the oil industry is not the industry that brings the solar panels in the world, or that the newspaper industry is not the industry that's going to thrive in internet publishing.
It's a classic innovator's dilemma, right? You don't want to innovate and kill your market share, basically. So these companies aren't doing that.
Yes, and so there's little investment in it, but people are fascinated by it, because if you ask people, would you eat in vitro meat, they say no, but they think it's...
Really?
Most people say, I'm not going to eat it. But they're fascinated by it. They want to read about it in the newspaper, and also because what I'm doing is creating potential products, but I'm of in vitro meat, but I'm just trying to figure out what kind of products it will be, because I think every new technology also brings about new habits, lifestyle. So we will get different food products, different eating habits, and then you could think of, if I want to eat in vitro meat, maybe I just have a meat powder. But that's one scenario. It's very artificial. But it could also be that you would have meat fruit. That's also one thing that was envisioned in our project, that you have this hybrid between fruit and meat. And there are other options, like a meat thread. Then it assumes that we can only produce small thread. And then we try to answer the question, okay, if meat thread is in the supermarket, what will that be?
It's funny, you put in one of your videos, you made an example of like kids food. Like if you make a kid's little chicken piece that looks like a dinosaur, they're going to be all over it. They'll be like, let me eat this, let me eat this. And if you think about a chicken McNugget, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
It's a cube that was created by McDonald's, and now everyone says, oh, that's chicken. So it's not that far of a disconnect to think that you might be manufacturing meat and people.
No, because the
eating
meat
it.
as we consume it today is already very abstract and
You could
processed.
argue it's manufactured too. It's just organically manufactured with chicken.
It's manufactured in a different way, and there are different levels of manufacturing it. But I think in principle, people have already proven that they eat all kinds of weird products like dinosaur nuggets, as you mentioned. But we think it's normal, and for me that's also a nice game I like to play, to put a different speculative scenario next to it, and then say, okay, so you eat the dinosaur nugget, but would you eat my magic meatball created from animal cells? And the children, if it's colorful, they will eat it.
They'll eat it, and they're the next generation. So, Koert, take us forward 100 years and tell me, I know it's a big guess, but what is this planet's going to look like as far as our relationship with nature and our consumption of food, and like what's a plausible scenario? I know 100 years probably isn't a long time. You probably think even further out, right? But what's a plausible scenario that we might find shocking now, but where you think is a way where we would just evolve into this next nature?
So much will be happening in the next 100 years. I think the basic thing that will happen is that ideally many of the technologies that we use, they become so advanced that they become indistinguishable from nature. That they are part of an ecosystem in a way that we don't recognize it as technology, but it feels natural, it feels humane.
Do you have an example of that? What was that technology that hasn't been invented yet?
Yeah, one example that springs to mind now, but it's from the past. It's which I think is very inspiring. That's the root bridges in India. In India, there are some areas where people have created bridges over a river simply by
growing the trees. I think
trees,
I saw that.
growing the roots from the trees, and then doing that for a while and guiding the growth of these roots. And then at a certain moment, you have a bridge. And I think that's a kind of architecture that's so smart, and it's already being done. But it's basically a way of looking. And if I look at our modern technology, then we often put in the technology in a very crude way, as an alien thing. And I think that's our task, to integrate it. Also, what I mentioned earlier, to find a balance between the biosphere and the technosphere. We have to accept that we created this technosphere. A lot of people don't want to accept that the technosphere is there, but it's not going away anymore, I'm sure. So we have to accept that we created it. We also have to embrace the complexity, because it is quite a force. We have to try to guide its growth rather than linger in the illusion that we can completely control it. And maybe we can also still learn a lot from our dealings with nature in the past to also cope with the next nature.
Like Google Glass is a good example. I mean,
Yeah.
that's technology that's now going to be on your face. It's going to be controlling your peripheral vision. They talked about how you're going to talk to somebody on Google Glass when they're going to be scrolling through Facebook with their eye. I mean, like, we're going to have to adopt this technosphere, like you're saying. So, like, what does that mean for our lives in the next 50, 100 years? I mean, how will we change? Will we be constantly plugged in somehow, like in the Google Glass, or?
I think we will be plugged in, but hopefully it will not feel like we are plugged in. Because there are different ways of being connected to technology or being plugged in. And some technologies, they numb our senses, but we would need technology that extends our senses. Technology that resonates with our intuitions, rather than technologies that denies our intuitions. Technologies that empower us as humans rather than outsource humans. And I think right now we have both these kind of technologies, but we kind of put them on one heap. And yeah, I'm striving for the technologies that become indistinguishable from nature, that also are a reflection of the best parts of our humanity. That's the kind of technology we need. And with the Google glasses, yeah, it could become this flickering spam box in the corner of your eye, or it could be an extra sense that resonates with your given senses. And of course, it should be the latter.
Do you think the problem with sort of those kinds of bits of technology is that the ones we have at the moment sort of overlay on top of our very sort of, active mind? It's something that goes in front of our eyes, as opposed to, so you got a Google Glass and you see a little square telling you the time. You have to see the time. It takes you away from reality, as opposed to something in your subconscious telling you what time it is.
Yes, it should be the latter, because it should resonate with your senses and with your sense of presence also. And there we still have a lot to do with our technology, because many technologies they don't do that. And often people also experience, especially information technology, as complex, frustrating. Whereas if you walk in the woods, then there's so much information around you, but you can cope with it easily. So why is that? It's because too many information technologies are always presented in the center of your attention, rather than in the periphery. And there's a lot to gain, I think. And then, in principle, it's not problematic that we are arriving in this co-evolutionary relationship with our technology, because we're already in it. I mean, I'm wearing clothes. Clothes is also technology, but I don't experience it as technology because it works.
Right. The other thing I always see is pets. You see a Dachshund, or we have a ragdoll cat, and I'm telling you, this thing would survive about 6 minutes in the wild. Like a barking Doberman, he will walk up to and sniff. And a Dachshund is this basically crippled animal that we've bred to be cute, that gets back problems because it's genetically deficient. Yet for us, it's probably part of nature. Yeah. Right?
What should I say?
I would say our cat is brought to us by Monsanto, and it's a better cat. What can I say? It is a better cat. It's nice, but it could never survive in nature. And maybe my concept of nature is wrong. I guess in the next nature, it does survive, doesn't it? It survives in my house.
Yeah, although these kind of cats, they are basically they're improved versions of the older nature. And I tend to perceive them as culture, because they're completely controlled and they are created. Just like the Dutch tomato is also quite famous in the world for being redder rounder, bigger than the ones you would grow in your own garden. But yeah, they're also in their end they're lacking some depth, and they are products.
Wasn't the original carrot green, and you guys bred it to be orange, and that's why it's your national color?
Yeah, that's the story. That the carrots. Well, they used to have all kinds of colors,
Like purple and blue.
purple, white, and around the period of Willem van Oranje, that was a Dutch, hero.
What year is it? What year is
people. That's 17th century, 16th century.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then he had to be supported, so breeders started making orange carrots, and that's what we buy now almost everywhere in the world.
Yeah,
so that's also an example of, because if you think of a carrot and you buy it in the supermarket, you think it's a natural thing. The same with a banana. If you buy a banana, you think that's a natural thing. But if you start to study the wild banana, it's full of seeds. It's hardly edible. So the product we buy in the supermarket is already very polished.
What's your take on social media as far as next nature? Because you just talked earlier, and back in the day in Holland, you would worry about the water taking over your home and your crops and you dying. And now people are worried about the mortgage rates or the stock market. Mm-hmm. And like on social media now, one of us might care what someone says thousands of miles away in a social media that we're never going to meet. Okay, now back in the day, having a clan, your pecking order in the clan would cause your survival. But now, some guy on Twitter or Facebook who I've never met before can make or break my day and change my attitude and my mind space, which is a ridiculous concept. But is that the next nature? And what's your call on that, Doctor?
It's sort of a next tribe, you know. And
it is. It's a perverted tribe.
Yeah. It's a perverted tribe. I try to not have the moral view immediately.
Right. Bad adjective. Sorry.
But no, I would agree it's quite perverted.
But it's the new reality.
It's the new reality. And why is it so successful? I also wonder, how is it possible that within 10 years it wasn't there and now it's there? And my explanation is that some technologies are very successful because they connect to deep human intuitions. And in this case, the social media even revives a human intuition which was not present anymore, which is this tribal relationship. You perceive yourself as part of a tribe, not so much as an individual. You define your identity through the other persons you are connected with, and that's in our genes, because that's where we come from. And these new technologies, they revive this intuition, and that's why they're so successful. So but they also transform it into something else.
So you're saying, like back in the hunter-gatherer days, we'd have like a 100-person clan that we would associate with, and then post-industrial revolution, you have cities with millions of people where you no longer have this clan because you're one of many.
Yes.
Now you're saying that Facebook and Twitter kind of get you back or transform that.
Yeah. We are re-tribalized in a way.
What do you think? Do you agree with that, Trey?
On some levels, I mean, over the last few weeks, one of the things I sort of felt quite strongly about Twitter in particular is that it sort of felt like, as an experiment, we've sort of achieved the closest thing to a human brain. Because the way we work, we have thoughts that are strong or weak depending on what we need in the moment, hunger versus desire to socialize. And Twitter has a similar kind of expansion of particular ideas. So there'll be one little idea, and if it's viral enough, it'll catch on, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, suddenly everyone does it. But it grows to a point that then it's too big and people start picking on it. And I feel like that's very much the way we think. And it sort of feels, maybe that's why we feel so natural, because it's kind of connected us in the same way that our own brain cells work together.
All right, yeah.
Interesting. But it's also anonymous, which is something we've never had before, because as the clan, you would know what he said and she said. And there was no, there was some masks back in the day, but this is proper anonymous.
It is different. So it's always, I think social media is a very good example of how a technology is successful, because it taps into this deep human intuition, but it's also transforming the intuition into something else, something new that might have different affordances, different drawbacks. And once you look at it from this perspective, perhaps you could also, if you're a designer of these systems, design them better. And if you're participating in, that you're more aware of what is actually happening, that you are part of this next tribe. And how do you want to cope with that?
You had an article on your website where you were saying that a computer algorithm is now replacing human journalists. There was a big app that was sold recently to Yahoo for like £10 million. Some English kid, I think, or American, who, this app writes articles, and it's a computer.
Sumly, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And how does that fit in with your concept of next nature? The fact that this, algorithm exists to replace a journalist.
Yeah, I think that's an example of technology outsourcing people, and it worries me sometimes.
Really?
Yeah,
that's a judgment.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Maybe the next nature, there should be no journalists.
Yeah, maybe the concept of the journalist, of course, that's also a technology and a construction that we are used to that habit, and it's transformed because of all the digital networks. And I'm not yet sure, because you could argue maybe right now, if you have a lawsuit and there's a judge judging it, it should be a human being doing it. But there might also be arguments that an algorithm should do it because it's more pure.
Yeah.
But then the algorithm should be, to its full extent, sensible for human qualities. And I think we're not there yet. So that's why it worries me. But I see the shift going on.
I always get in trouble with my friends when discussing these type of things, because I take the opposite view. I always get excited by anything that removes a human job from existence, because I think it frees us up to do something else, something more interesting.
Yeah, that's true. If it can be automated, then probably it was not an interesting job for a person after all. That's true. That already starts with the Industrial Revolution, that is heavy physical work. You rather not do it. But then once machines do it, then you have to go to the gym in order to maintain your body. So there's always this trade-off.
And that'll continue happening as we develop more technologies. We'll probably cycle in and out of that.
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think that will never end.
Okay.
And in a way, that's also the path we're on. So that's the human story and our relationship with nature. That will go on. And we transform nature, but also as we are doing that, we are also transforming what it means to be human. It's shifting. And that may sound worrying, because then, if you look at it from a negative side, you think we're losing ground, but no, we're just mutating. And I think that's really a natural thing to do. Although many people think, okay, I believe in evolution, and we know that we crawled from the ocean, and then we became monkeys, and then we were human beings, and now it's the end point of it, like we are the summit of evolution. But of course, that's not the case. Things will change again. And I think we're not completely in control, and we're not gods that we can design our own future, because it's way too complex. But we are a catalyst, and we have to find a way to steer it. That's also what I focus on.
What about genetic engineering?
Yeah, there's the same, all these issues playing there, because with genetic engineering, you start to design, what do you want to engineer? First, maybe fruits, we're already doing that. And then later...
Cats, dogs,
and of course in the end, humans. I think in principle, I'm not against it. It's just that, what are your expectations? If your expectation is that you're going to turn your cat into a perfect cat, in the end it might be a very boring, handicapped being that you're designing. So we should also not be too naive and too optimistic on that we can create a better world with technology.
One of your quotes is that humans, we play with fire. That's what we do.
Yes.
So this whole genetic engineering, it's going to happen, isn't it? So
Yes.
It's just how we accept it and how we deal with it.
Also, in relation to genetic engineering, the discussion too often is about, should we do it, yes or no? Is it ethical to do it, yes or no? And I think that's a too flat, black and white decision. We are playing with fire already for a very long time. It defines us as humans. And if we should say we have to stop now playing with fire, that's also a denial of what it means to be human. and it's also a certain cowardice towards the unknown. So we are playing with fire, but then the question is, what do we want to do? What direction do we want to go? So genetic engineering, we are going to do that because it's not something, even if there's no consensus, and I don't think there will be an exact consensus on how we should do it, because the philosophical or political or religious differences are just too big, but it is happening. And we have to, because there are labs in the world that can do it. There are people with money who have a desire to do it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to stop it. It's happening, and we should ask the question, how? What direction do we want to go?
I think this is the essence of your whole philosophy of next nature, is that it's not black and white. And that's why I think you are more of a philosopher than anything else, because you hear about the green movement and it's like, do you want global warming? No. And you get all these things. Do you want abortion? No. And like you're saying, well, look, let's try not to be judgmental about this and give it a digital yes or no. It's happening, whether we like it or not. And now we have to find a different way to get our head around it.
Yes, and also towards the future. I think we need to learn to love the future again. We need to also embrace that things will change, because things will change, and try to find a way that's a good path, and have a discussion about what path we can take, rather than if we should turn back or go forward.
You know, we had Rachel Armstrong here, who recommended you for being our guest, and thank you, Rachel, for that. If you want to see her episode, it's called Earth's Bright Future. And Rachel, she's working on a space project that you might be working on, which is like 100 years out, how to send some type of beings on these really long space voyages. And during the show, Rachel said something like, she's like, maybe the future is not having humans on the planet. And she's like, maybe we shouldn't make a moral call about that, and maybe that is an evolution. And it was just a really weird concept. I think as egoic humans, we're always like, well, if we all kill each other, but I mean, she's like, maybe that's part of nature. I don't know. What do you think of that thought? It's a little scary.
It's
but it's something I think she brought up.
It might happen, although that would mean that humanity would outsource itself in a way, that we would be the species that we transform the planet into something else, but we also make it inhabitable for ourselves. And if that's the scenario, then I think we're not doing the right thing. So in that sense, I'm more in the position that we have to change with it. Evolution goes on, but hopefully in a way that's rewarding for mankind as well, in which we also have a position as mankind. And ideally, we create the technologies that are a reflection of the best we have to offer as people. And then we might have something to be truly proud of.
What if there's less people? What if we taper down to 1 billion people in, say, 100 years? You okay with that?
Yeah, for me, the number is not that important.
As long as there's a race.
As long as, well.
So if 6 billion people die, you're okay with that? Or, sorry, evolve.
Yes.
I mean, maybe in the next nature, it's the planet shouldn't be 9 billion people. Maybe the next nature should be 1 billion.
That it should be less, or it should be more. I have no idea, I must say, because certainly if you want to go back to the old nature, then it should be less. Because if you want to go back to a world without mobile phones, without electric light, without agriculture, then you're basically going back to the hunting-gathering lifestyle, and then you cannot live in London with this amount of people. You need more space. But I don't think we're going back, we're going forward, so maybe there's even room for more people. I don't have a number.
Okay. You have a project called the Data Fountain, which I think is an internet-enabled water fountain connected to the money currency rates. And you brought some currency with you today.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that word that Dre and I have been talking a lot about, which is Bitcoin. And we probably are going to have a whole episode about that. But I was fascinated to see you talking about money, because it's kind of what I used to do. When I look at you, and you seem like a nature guy. But why do you talk about currencies?
Yeah, I brought.
What have you got?
Yeah, I think the currency is also a very striking example of how we can consume images and how we can. We're talking about virtual currencies now, but if you think about the past, then you realize that currency is virtual for a very long time. And I brought some examples. So what I brought here, I should hold it here.
Yeah.
So now it's in the camera. What we see here is a very old piece of spade money, because before coins existed, people used to, well, not have money, but just trade gear, like you would trade a spade for 3 chicken.
Right.
But then what happened was that a rich person at a certain moment had a lot of gear, spades, and you owned them, but you would not use them anymore to work. You would not operate them. You would just have them to trade.
Right.
And
So
then blacksmiths started to make them
for
small.
people listening to us on iTunes, first of all, you can come see this on YouTube at London Real TV. But he's showing looks like an oxidized piece of copper that probably was used as a small spade to dig. But it sounds like it soon became a unique piece of currency, and people stop using it as a tool.
Yeah, I think
right?
it's fascinating already that people
It's tiny.
people accept that a tool becomes too small to use, but it has a function for trading. And in a way, it's already here. It's becoming virtual because you're not using the tool anymore.
Right.
And then the next step is that it's becoming more, well, stylized. And then at a certain moment, someone
What is
says,
that? What's the second one you're holding?
yeah, this is also a spade. It still looks like a spade, but
Looks like a person almost.
yeah, it becomes more.
So it's more stylized.
And then someone says, like, let's make it round.
Right. This
And
is like an old Chinese coin or something.
Yeah, this is all Chinese.
Oh, it's all Chinese.
So just to understand the abstraction that people had to go through in their time, this is where 600 BC, the abstraction people had to go through to accept that this had the same value as this, that was already a virtual reality of that time, I would say.
Okay.
And it goes on, of course, then you have the coin,
Right.
and next you have, of course, paper money.
Which is very virtual. Well, then you have a number in a bank account.
Yes, and then someone says, well, in the past there was a lot of gold in some location that represents all the paper money, but
Right, the gold
we can
standard.
move away from that, the gold standard.
Right, which was in the 60s and 50s, and Nixon took us off.
Yeah, Nixon took us off.
He said, okay, no
1972.
longer does that piece of paper equal a certain amount of gold held in Fort Knox. Now the paper has value because it's from the United States, right?
The government says it has value,
Right.
so we believe in the government, hence it has value.
So that's an evolution of nature in your mind because humans are part of nature.
Yeah, I would describe it as a next nature, but also that the government is this ecosystem defining entity. We live in a country, which is of course a construction. There's a government and they say this has value. And as long as it functions, we do fine. It's fine. And now recently we have the Bitcoin money, which it's very new still, and people describe it as virtual money. I'm not impressed by the notion of calling it virtual money because I think this coin is already in a way very, very virtual.
Because it has value because someone says it has value.
Yes,
in your mind.
yeah,
Okay.
it's an agreement.
Now,
But the interesting thing with Bitcoin is that there's no government backing it up. It's only an algorithm that's creating it. So in a way, it used to be in gold we trust, and then it was in the government we trust, and now it's in the math we trust.
Now, for people who want a little more background, Trey, can you tell us a bit more about Bitcoins and your experience with them? And I'm going to ask you both if you own any.
I currently have still left in my account 0.87 Bitcoins.
Okay.
I've used a few. I was first interested in the concept a few years ago because I always thought the next step for money would be to become purely digital.
Okay.
I thought it was kind of silly to carry around, bits of paper and coin, and it made things harder to track, like tax and things like that.
Or even a debit card, which is kind of a number in an account.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to completely digitalize it in some way and have it centralized, I thought originally would be the best idea, but this is almost the exact opposite. So what Bitcoin does is using complex maths and algorithm is get computers around the world to kind of use mathematics to both create money, but also allow the exchange of money without it being duplicated or spoofed in any way. So all the computers that are part of the Bitcoin network are sort of crunching numbers all the time and allowing the currency to exist and to be transferred from one account to the other.
And does everyone's Bitcoin kind of have a summary of the current accounts of everyone's Bitcoin? Like, does your Bitcoin kind of tell other people how much they have in their account, so that way it can't be tampered with? Or is it not that simple?
I don't think it works quite like that. It's most Bitcoin accounts will be ones that you store on your own computer.
Okay.
And so the file that's encrypted on your computer is actually where the notion of how much money you have is stored. And it's a bit strange how it all works.
And what are the implications for the Bitcoin, do you think, for us, for society, and as a next nature perspective?
No, I think, it's a big question mark whether Bitcoin as it is now will stay.
Okay.
Because there are lots of problems.
You said you're not impressed with the Bitcoin.
I am impressed. I'm very much impressed with
Okay.
the Bitcoin, but it might also, certainly, if Bitcoin goes down, then there will be another monetary unit that's inspired on Bitcoin, and that might then be there to stay. So
Right.
it's not, I'm not sure if this particular system will stay, but something is happening. And what I think is very elegant and interesting about this cryptocurrency, because it's based on complex math and algorithms that kind of locks it, and there's no human steward, like with the euro, the pound. The government is steering that, and they can decide to print more when they need. So there are people behind it, steering it, and that might be a good thing, but there are also power relations. And what I like about Bitcoin is that it's pure math, which I think is an interesting position. If you look at the classical distinction body-mind or matter-mind, then a gold currency is the ultimate matter currency, but the Bitcoin currency is the ultimate mind or math currency. Right. It's very, it's just a analytical construction. And the currencies we use today, they're somewhere in between. They're more messy in a way. So that's why I think, if not Bitcoin, there will be some other cryptocurrency being created that might be the new norm. Because there is something very elegant there. It's
possible that they haven't thought of all the pitfalls, because like any technology, there's a version in the future that might have thought of all those little things. So,
and one very clear pitfall is that it's anonymous, that you can buy stuff and it's very hard to track you. And there's already, there are all these stories out that it's being used by criminals and I think in the end that's not what we want, because that's Wild West. And I think in the long run, anonymous money will not exist anymore at all. So probably the next step will be some kind of crypto Bitcoin currency, but then it cannot be anonymous. It will be connected through its owner, and it will be visible who's owning it. And
it is the de facto currency because it is anonymous right now. But if you think about the rest of the currency worlds, they've all been made not anonymous. Like, you can't walk into a Swiss bank account with £1 million in cash. Like Howard Marks told us 2 weeks ago, he was a huge drug smuggler. He's like, you can't do that these days. This whole bearer currency form, everyone tracks big amounts of cash. So now Bitcoin maybe is trying to do that, digitally. But I find it interesting. People talk about the Federal Reserve in America and how they do lots of bad things. They're printing money. They artificially hold rates here and there. But you could argue that maybe you need a human component in a currency market to basically say, wait a second, guys, you're going crazy. And you're from the country that had the tulip crisis.
Yes.
Was this in the 1400s?
I think also 16th century.
Okay.
Twice.
I mean, just to give a break, I mean, you probably know better than me, but there was a point where people were spending outlandish amounts of money for the most perfect tulip.
One tulip was the price of a large house.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But also, paper money was abolished in the 14th century in China. That they said, paper money, we cannot, it's not solid enough. We quit paper money. But then, of course, some period later it's introduced again, because it's also very practical to have paper money rather than a whole bag of coins. So there are always these back and forth developments.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even the guy that did Guns, Germs, and Steel, the author, he talks about how in Japan, like, the gun which was an advanced technology, became not used in like the 1800s because the samurai sword was considered honorable and a gun was considered disgusting. So it was basically, it disappeared. So it had like a technology reversal.
Which in a way, it reflects also a very sophisticated culture that they decide we're not going to use this technology. The only thing that happens then is that the Europeans at a certain moment walk in and they do use guns, and then
they shoot you.
Yeah, they shoot the Japanese.
Dre, what do you think is the future of the Bitcoin?
I think it's going to be interesting to see because, I mean, I thought that the money was definitely going to go this way, but I did not expect it to be so distributed. The reason why Bitcoin is interesting is because it's completely decentralized. It works much like the BitTorrent network, which is why BitTorrent is hard to sort of stop.
Right.
It's because everybody that's participating in it is equally responsible for the creation and maintaining of the system. So it's completely decentralized and therefore has a life that is completely on its own, and it's so much closer to nature than technology that it follows sort of evolution that we probably won't be able to kind of stop and control. It will be a case of if it goes extinct, it goes extinct on its own without any input from us, I think.
It's almost like natural evolution, you know? Yeah. It's like either going to happen or not. Nature doesn't have morals. It either dies or doesn't die, right?
Yes, yeah, that's important to know. That nature in itself doesn't have morals. It's the human position that brings in the morality.
Yeah, it's always hard to keep
I never really thought about money that way until today, but it is one of the most perfect examples of the concept that you illustrate in your book about using Razorius gelatus as an example.
Non-genetic evolution.
Which is the idea that sort of the scientific species name for the Gillette razor.
Okay.
As a theory that the fact that it's evolved to have 4 or 5 blades and it's electric is very similar in process to the human evolution or evolution of a species.
Because it's the only way it would survive is if it adapted and became more advanced, because otherwise people would literally not buy it anymore.
Yeah, what I did was I studied these Gillette razors, and it started as a personal project because I just noticed I have some different ones. And the first one I bought was just a very simple stick with 2 blades. And now the latest model, it's a battery-powered 6-bladed device that looks like a vacuum cleaner. And if you look at the whole development, then I wonder, okay, what's happening? Is this evolution? And most people say it's not evolution because people are designing it. But if you study the marketplace and how a razor has to stand out, then you notice there are a lot of similarities with an evolutionary process. So new models have to be introduced in order to be bought. And you see functional changes. You also see purely aesthetic changes, which remind me of the feathers of a peacock, which in a biological evolution also really, they don't have a function except to stand out. Yeah. So something similar is happening with these razors. It's only that we as people, we're designing them, so it's a co-evolution then.
That's a good example. That's a very concrete example. The evolution of the razor, you know.
Yes, yeah, and but also in a way you can look at it and just say that's fun. You see those razors go, but then if I ask the question, do I really need that new razor with 6 blades? The answer is, well, no. So is this really helpful kind of evolution, and can we also steer it in another direction? Then that's the next question.
Wow. You know, before we go, I want to know, Koert, how do you get your ideas? You know, do you take a bunch of psychedelics and go into a dark room?
I don't.
But seriously, you have a crazy brain. I think sometimes your brain is more advanced than what you can even communicate. I think that's why you use pictures and drawings, because sometimes your ideas are... Where do you get this from?
I think my answer has to be that... a few years ago, this light went on, and I thought, wait, next nature, I have to look at it from this perspective. And since then, I always try to frame things from that perspective, and it's just how my brain works. So yeah, and I do have an education. I studied computer science, I studied art school, and studied philosophy. So, and I kind of mix those, and I try to be always in a setting with people. Whether it's students or people on the street that the discussion is on this topic. So then it just goes on and on.
Okay. And what's next for you in this year and then the next 5 years? I mean, do you have long-term projects, or what is it?
I think the next nature perspective is now at an awareness phase. So we are becoming aware that technology is our next nature, that it's not the opposite of nature, but that we are creating this next nature without technology, that it's all around us, becomes sort of autonomous, not often controllable, also very intimate. That awareness is now arriving in our society at large. And the next step is to answer the question, okay, if we can look at it like this, then how are we going to design? How are we going to build? How are we going to live? What are the implications, both practical implications as well as ethical implications? Because if I look out of the window now and I see a building there that has not been put there according to next nature philosophy, and that might be different in 50 years, that really the world will look different. So I'm really eager also to play a role in that and to participate in that.
Yeah, I think your timing is perfect. Although you watch the show Mad Men in the States, and you think, and they think they're in a technology advancement.
Yeah, nothing new.
And in a cultural advancement, you see, black rights and marches, and they're getting all this technology. They're trying LSD, and it's like it's not any different than now.
No.
I think a man always thinks they're on the cusp of the next.
Yes, but that's why I also use the term next nature and not new nature. Okay. Because if you would use new nature, then you would introduce it as something unique that is happening now.
Right.
But next nature is there's always next. So there's the
so
next
like
nature.
saying the future, it's always ahead of you.
Yeah, and there's also a next nature of the past. Nature is continuously transforming and changing. And indeed, for us, it feels like a unique moment in time. But yeah, if you look at our grandparents, they were introduced with airplanes. For the first time, the dream of having people flying around was
concept.
that must have been such an exciting moment for them. And we are on a crowded airport, like, I have to be in London at 6 o'clock. Get it on.
Do you feel like most people that this process of next nature, technology in general, is accelerating and that we're getting there faster and faster? Or is it an illusion because, just like Mad Men, we think that we are where we are?
I don't know. I don't know if it's accelerating, because it's tempting to think that it's accelerating, and we know that computers are becoming faster every 2 years and that it's exponential and stuff. Yeah. But if you think of the really life-changing changes and innovations that happen in a lifetime, I don't know if that is accelerating. We have a lot of stuff going on, but big steps that completely change humanity and what it means to be human, I don't know if that is accelerating. It's certainly not new. There are these moments in the past, like I just mentioned, flying in an airplane. That's really a big step. What are we? We now have mobile phones, social media. I don't know if that's just a bigger step. Probably the internet is a very big step. We also talked about new kind of currencies. If that arrives in our society, it will transform it will transform our economics, our marketplace. That might be a very big step. But if it's accelerating, I really don't know. I don't know.
That's fair. I think that's a very honest answer, because it's easy to think we're accelerating, but we're in the capsule.
Yeah.
So what would we know? Koert, how can people get a copy of your book, Next Nature?
It's available at the Better Bookshop, or you can simply go to the website nextnature.net /book, and then the mailman will bring it very soon.
And you're on Twitter, which is at Mensvoort?
Yes.
Which is Mensvoort.
Yes. Indeed.
Is that right? Okay. Yes. And you're back to Eindhoven, this weekend?
I live in Amsterdam, so I'm back to Amsterdam tomorrow, and then next week again in Eindhoven. I'm always traveling between Eindhoven and Amsterdam, and then sometimes nice trips to other cities like London. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's a cool town. So I smell a road trip, though. What do you think?
I think so.
Will you show us around Amsterdam if we?
Oh yes, certainly. You're very, very welcome.
I've never been. Have you been, Brian?
I've been once, but it wasn't the right Amsterdam experience.
Oh, why not?
I think I just went in as a tourist, and I think I saw what some people think is Amsterdam, which is the nightlife. But I know there's a lot going on underneath, so I would love to hang out with a local.
Yes.
And get away a little bit from the ultra party scene, in the very center.
Yeah. I always I avoid the center.
It's like coming to London and hanging out in Leicester Square for the whole weekend. I mean, it's not London, so it can be fun for a night, but it's nice to see the deep inside. So.
Okay, see you in Amsterdam.
Cool, done. Dre, thanks so much for being here. It's nice to have your tech background and your bioscience, and so good dynamic. And Koert, thanks so much. It's been interesting. It's hard to get my head around your concept, but you must hear that all the time. But I think we kind of got there, especially at the end. I'm just trying to see, but it's since it's a philosophical change, I think it's hard for people.
Yeah, I'm really asking people to shift their perspective like 90 degrees, and once it clicks, then you see it everywhere. So, yeah, maybe some of the listeners made the click, and then hopefully they will walk out of their home and they see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think it can affect your mental state too. It can affect. You might be depressed that the world's changing, or you could look at it in a different way and be like, okay, the world is changing.
Yeah, there are also lots of opportunities.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening to us and you want to see the extremely good-looking Koert, come to see us at YouTube channel, London Real TV. If you're on iTunes, please click and subscribe. Yes, we are on Twitter, and we love getting Twitter messages, don't we?
We certainly do.
We do. Love that technology, and we're on Facebook. Come check us out. And if you really want to get involved, you can email us at info@londonreal.tv. You can intern. It's very exciting being an intern these days. Or just tell us who you'd like to see as future guests. And Koert, thanks so much for coming on. I hope you have a good time in London, and we'll see you again in Holland.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful.
Okay, peace, guys.
Welcome to London.
You roll over. There's this one line that I wrote that was answering hopelessness with a defiant smile and raised middle finger. And that's exactly what that was about. It's like horrendous things happen. I'm gonna find a way to have fun anyway, motherfucker.